She only had $5 for a blind date. Her hands trembled as she counted the crumpled bills, praying her date wouldn't walk out in disgust. But across the room, a Mafia boss was watching. His reputation? Ruthless, heartless, dangerous. Everyone expected him to mock her, maybe even humiliate her. But then he slammed his glass down, stood up, and walked straight to her table. What came out of his mouth next left everyone in the restaurant stunned. Stay with me until the end, because this story will leave you breathless. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get started. The evening rain drummed against the windows of Benedetto's, a small Italian restaurant tucked between a dry cleaner and a florist shop on the east side of town. The warm glow of amber lighting cast long shadows across checkered tablecloths, while the scent of garlic and fresh basil filled the air. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean, affordable, and far enough from her apartment that she wouldn't run into anyone she knew. Maya Rodriguez sat at table 7, her fingers nervously smoothing the fabric of her only decent dress. Black, simple, borrowed from her roommate who was 3 sizes smaller. The sleeves were too short. The hem rode up when she sat, but it would have to do. She had saved for 3 weeks to afford this date, skipping lunch most days, walking to work instead of taking the bus, counting every penny until she finally had enough for a modest dinner. Her phone buzzed against the scratched wooden table. A message from Derek, the guy she'd met through a dating app 2 weeks earlier. His profile had seemed genuine enough. Software engineer, loved hiking, owned a golden retriever named Max. His messages were thoughtful, not pushy. When he suggested meeting at Benedetto's, she had hesitated before saying yes. It had taken her months to work up the courage to date again. The message read simply, "Running about 20 minutes late. Traffic is insane. Order something if you're hungry. Can't wait to see you." Maya exhaled slowly, relief mixing with anxiety in her chest. 20 minutes. She could handle 20 minutes. She glanced around the restaurant, taking in the other diners. A young couple shared a pizza in the corner booth, laughing over something on her phone. An elderly man sat alone, methodically working through a plate of spaghetti while reading a newspaper. And then there was the table near the back. 3 men in expensive suits occupied the corner table, their voices low but their presence commanding. Even from across the room, Maya could sense the weight of their conversation. The man facing her direction had steel gray hair slicked back, a strong jawline, and eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of the restaurant. His suit probably cost more than she made in 6 months. When their eyes met briefly, she looked away quickly, focusing on her folded hands. Vincent Marcelli had been coming to Benedetto's every Tuesday for the past 8 years. It was routine, predictable, safe. The owner, Giuseppe, was a distant cousin who understood the value of discretion. The food was good, the booths were private, and the location was perfect for conducting business that required a certain level of anonymity. Tonight's meeting was about territory disputes, shipment schedules, and the kind of problems that arose when ambitious men forgot their place in the hierarchy. Vincent had dealt with these issues countless times before. His reputation for swift, decisive action had kept his organization running smoothly for over 2 decades. People feared him, respected him, and most importantly, they listened when he spoke. But something about the girl at table 7 kept drawing his attention away from the conversation. She sat alone, checking her phone every few minutes, adjusting her dress, fidgeting with a small black purse that looked like it had seen better years. There was something fragile about her, like a bird that had wandered too far from its nest. Maya ordered a glass of water and asked the server if she could wait a bit longer before ordering food. The server, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes, nodded and moved on to other tables. Maya pulled out her phone again, scrolling through Derek's messages from the past week. He seemed excited about their date, asked thoughtful questions about her work at the community center, remembered details from their previous conversations. 30 minutes passed, then 45. Maya's water glass had been refilled twice. The server had stopped by 3 times, each visit more pointed than the last. Other diners came and went. The restaurant began to fill with the dinner crowd, and Maya felt increasingly out of place sitting alone at a table meant for 2. Her phone buzzed again. This time, her heart sank as she read the message. "Hey, so something came up with work. Emergency situation. Rain check? Really sorry about this." Maya stared at the screen, reading the words over and over. No explanation. No suggestion for rescheduling. Just a casual dismissal after she'd been waiting for nearly an hour. She felt heat rise in her cheeks, a mixture of embarrassment and disappointment that threatened to spill over into tears she refused to shed in public. Vincent watched the exact moment her face changed. He'd been observing her peripherally while his associates discussed shipping routes and payment schedules, but now his full attention was on the girl whose shoulders had just slumped in defeat. She set her phone down carefully as if it might shatter and reached for her purse with trembling fingers. The server approached her table again, and Vincent could see the girl's lips moving in what was clearly an apology. She was explaining why she needed to leave, alone, after waiting for over an hour. The server's expression softened with understanding, the look of someone who'd seen this scenario play out before. Vincent had built his reputation on reading people, on understanding their motivations, their weaknesses, their breaking points. It was a skill that had kept him alive in a business where trust was currency and betrayal was often rewarded with violence. But watching this girl gather her courage to face the humiliation of walking out alone struck something unexpected in him. She stood slowly, smoothing her dress one final time. Her chin lifted slightly, a small gesture of dignity in the face of disappointment. She was preparing to walk out with her head held high, even though Vincent could see the effort it was taking her. The conversation at his table continued around him, but Vincent's focus had shifted entirely. He watched as the girl took a step toward the exit, then another. The server called after her, but she waved off whatever was being offered. Charity, perhaps. Pity. Things that someone with her pride would never accept. Vincent set down his wine glass with more force than necessary. The sound cut through the ambient restaurant noise, causing his associates to pause mid-sentence. In one fluid movement, he pushed back his chair and stood, his imposing frame casting a shadow across their table. "Where do you think you're going?" Vincent's voice carried across the restaurant, low and commanding. Every conversation stopped. Forks paused halfway to mouths. The elderly man folded his newspaper and looked up. Even the kitchen seemed to quiet, as if the entire establishment held its breath. Maya froze 3 steps from the exit, her hand still reaching for the door handle. She turned slowly, confusion written across her face. The imposing man in the expensive suit was looking directly at her, his gray eyes intense but not unkind. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Vincent approached her table with measured steps, each footfall deliberating on the worn wooden floors. His associates remained seated, but their posture had shifted. Alert, ready. They'd learned long ago to follow their boss's lead, even when they couldn't understand his motivations. "You haven't eaten," Vincent said simply, stopping beside table 7. Up close, Maya could see the fine details of his suit, the way his shirt collar was perfectly pressed, the subtle gold of his cufflinks. Everything about him spoke of power, of money, of a world she'd never glimpsed. "I was just leaving," Maya managed, her voice stronger now but still uncertain. "Sit down." It wasn't a request. Vincent pulled out her chair, waiting. The gesture was oddly genteel, old-fashioned in a way that didn't match his reputation, or the fear she could sense rippling through the restaurant. After a moment's hesitation, Maya sat. Vincent signaled to the server, who appeared instantly at their table. Her earlier weariness had been replaced by nervous energy. "Giuseppe," Vincent called to the owner, who emerged from behind the counter looking both pleased and anxious to see his most influential customer. "Vincent, my friend, what can I do for you? The lady will have the osso buco." the good bottle of Chianti, and bring her some of Maria's bread, the kind with the herbs. Vincent's eyes never left Maya's face as he spoke. She's been waiting long enough. Giuseppe nodded rapidly and disappeared into the kitchen, shouting orders in rapid Italian. The server hurried away to fetch wine. Within minutes, the table was transformed with fresh bread, olive oil, a glass of deep red wine that probably cost more than Maya's weekly grocery budget. Maya stared at the spread before her, overwhelmed. "I can't afford this," she said quietly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Did I ask you to pay?" The question hung between them. Vincent settled into the chair across from her, his movements deliberate and controlled. He poured himself a glass of wine from the bottle, then refilled hers. "I don't understand," Maya said. "Why would you do this?" Vincent studied her face, taking in the way she held herself despite her obvious discomfort, the pride that kept her spine straight, even as her world felt like it was tilting off its axis. "You remind me of someone I used to know," he said finally. The answer felt incomplete, but before Maya could press further, the osso buco arrived. The aroma of braised veal, tomatoes, and herbs filled the space between them. It was the most expensive dish on the menu, something she'd only read about but never dared to order. "Eat," Vincent commanded gently. Maya took a tentative bite, then another. The meat fell apart at the touch of her fork, rich and tender in a way that made her close her eyes involuntarily. She hadn't realized how hungry she'd been, how many meals she'd skipped to save money for this date that never happened. Vincent watched her eat, occasionally sipping his wine but saying nothing. Around them, the restaurant slowly returned to its normal rhythm, though Maya could feel curious glances from other diners. The men at Vincent's original table remained where they were, their business apparently suspended indefinitely. "What's your name?" Vincent asked after she'd eaten several bites. "Maya Rodriguez." She paused, fork halfway to her mouth. "And you are?" A slight smile played at the corner of Vincent's mouth. It was the first genuine expression she'd seen from him. Vincent Martelli. The name meant nothing to Maya, but she caught the subtle shift in atmosphere around them. A couple at a nearby table exchanged meaningful looks. The server's hand trembled slightly as she refilled their water glasses. "Are you famous or something?" Maya asked innocently. The question drew a genuine laugh from Vincent, low and rich. "Something like that." He leaned back in his chair, studying her with newfound interest. "You really don't know who I am, should I? Most people in this neighborhood would." Maya shrugged, taking another bite of the osso buco. "I don't live in this neighborhood. I work at the community center across town. I came here because it seemed nice and I could afford it." She paused, a flush of embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "Well, I thought I could afford it." Vincent's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "What do you do at the community center?" "I run after-school programs for kids whose parents work late. Art classes, homework help, sometimes we cook together. It's not glamorous, but it matters." Maya's voice grew stronger as she talked about her work, the pride evident despite her circumstances. "And the man who stood you up tonight?" The question brought back the sting of disappointment. Maya set down her fork, her appetite wavering. "Someone I met online. We'd been talking for 2 weeks. He seemed different from the others, more genuine." She laughed bitterly. "Guess I was wrong about that too." Vincent's jaw tightened slightly. In his world, a man's word was his bond. Breaking a commitment, especially to someone vulnerable, was a sign of weakness that he found personally offensive. "His loss," Vincent said simply. The words carried weight, sincerity that surprised Maya. She looked at him more carefully, noting the way his eyes crinkled slightly at the corners, the small scar near his left temple, the careful way he held himself as if always ready for trouble. "Can I ask you something?" Maya said. Vincent nodded. "Why are you being so kind to me? You don't know me. I'm nobody special. I can't do anything for you." The question struck deeper than Vincent had expected. He'd been asking himself the same thing since he'd stood up from his table. In his line of work, kindness was often perceived as weakness, Generosity without expectation of return was practically unheard of. Yet something about this girl's quiet dignity in the face of humiliation had reached a part of him he'd thought was permanently buried. Maybe, Vincent said carefully. Kindness doesn't always need a reason. Maya considered this, twirling pasta around her fork. In my experience, people usually want something, even when they pretend they don't. What do you think I want from you? The question was direct, challenging. Maya met his gaze steadily, searching for deception and finding none. I honestly don't know, and that scares me a little. Vincent respected her honesty. Good instincts. But you're safe with me, Maya Rodriguez. Safer than you've been in a long time. Something in his tone made her believe him, despite every rational thought telling her to be cautious. They ate in comfortable silence for several minutes, the weight of unspoken questions hanging between them like morning fog. The evening had taken a turn neither of them could have predicted. Maya found herself relaxing despite the surreal nature of the situation, while Vincent discovered that the simple act of sharing a meal without agenda or expectation felt like a luxury he'd forgotten existed. But across the restaurant, his associates were growing restless, and Maya couldn't shake the feeling that this interlude was too perfect to last. The server approached their table again, this time with fresh coffee and a small plate of cannoli. Maya hadn't ordered dessert, but Vincent had made a subtle gesture that she'd missed. The woman set everything down with practiced efficiency, though her movements carried the careful respect of someone who understood exactly who she was serving. Giuseppe's wife makes these herself, Vincent explained, nudging the plate toward Maya. Family recipe from Sicily. Maya looked at the golden pastries filled with sweet ricotta, decorated with pistachios and tiny chocolate chips. You really don't have to keep doing this. I know. His response was matter of fact, without elaboration. Vincent sipped his espresso, watching as Maya tentatively tried the cannoli. Her eyes widened at the first bite, a genuine smile breaking across her face for the first time that evening. This is incredible, she said, taking another bite. I've never had anything like it. Most places use store-bought shells. Maria makes hers fresh every morning. Vincent's voice carried a note of pride that seemed oddly personal for someone discussing a restaurant dessert. As Maya enjoyed the cannoli, Vincent found himself studying her reactions with unexpected fascination. In his world, people performed constantly. Every smile was calculated, every gesture designed to gain favor or advantage. But Maya's responses were unguarded, authentic in a way he'd almost forgotten existed. Can I ask what you do for work? Maya said, setting down her fork. And please don't say something like that again. Vincent's mouth quirked upward. I handle logistics for family businesses. Import, export, distribution. Making sure things run smoothly. It was technically true, though it omitted several crucial details about the nature of those businesses and what happened when things didn't run smoothly. Maya nodded, accepting the explanation without the probing questions that might have followed from someone more familiar with his reputation. That sounds complicated. It can be. Lot of moving pieces. People depending on you to make the right decisions. Vincent paused, considering how much truth to reveal. Sometimes you have to be harder than you want to be. Make choices that protect the people who matter. Maya sensed layers beneath his words, complexities she couldn't fully grasp. Do you like it? What you do? The question caught Vincent off guard. In 30 years of business, no one had ever asked him that. Success was measured in territory, respect, fear. Personal satisfaction was a luxury he'd never considered relevant. It's what I'm good at, he said finally. That's not the same thing. Her observation was gentle but perceptive. Vincent found himself looking at her with increased interest. This girl who counted $5 bills and borrowed dresses was asking questions that his most sophisticated associates never dared. What about you? He deflected. Do you like working with kids? Maya's face lit up immediately. I love it. These kids, they come in after school and they're tired, stressed about homework or problems at home. But you give them some art supplies or help them with math, and suddenly they're just children again, laughing, creating, being curious about everything. She paused, her expression growing thoughtful. I know it doesn't pay much, and people think I should want more, but making that difference in their lives? It's worth everything. Vincent recognized the passion in her voice, the sense of purpose that had been missing from his own life for longer than he cared to acknowledge. When had he last felt that kind of genuine satisfaction from his work? When had anyone in his organization talked about making a difference rather than making money? How many kids do you work with? About 40 regulars, but it varies. Some days we have 60, some days 20. Depends on what's happening in their families, whether they feel safe coming. Maya's expression darkened slightly. The neighborhood isn't great. A lot of violence, drugs, kids getting pulled into things they shouldn't. Vincent's attention sharpened. He knew the neighborhoods Maya was describing, understood the dynamics she was referencing better than she could imagine. Where exactly is your center located? Riverside District, near the old textile factory. You probably don't know it. Most people avoid that area. Vincent knew it well. It was on the edge of territory controlled by the Torino family, a group that had been pushing boundaries lately, testing his organization's patience. The fact that Maya worked in that area, surrounded by the kind of violence his world generated, created an uncomfortable knot in his stomach. It's dangerous there, especially for someone like you, someone like me, someone who sees the good in people, who trusts easily. Vincent's voice carried a warning she couldn't quite interpret. There are men in that neighborhood who would take advantage of that kindness. Maya straightened, a flash of steel entering her voice. I'm not naive, Mr. Marcelli. I know what goes on in my neighborhood. I've seen kids come in with bruises, heard stories that would break your heart. But running away doesn't help anyone. These children need someone who believes in them, who shows them there's another way. The fire in her response impressed Vincent more than her earlier vulnerability had. This wasn't just kindness. It was courage. Deliberate, conscious courage that chose to stand in the face of danger because something mattered more than safety. Have you ever been threatened? Anyone give you trouble? Why do you ask? Vincent hesitated, aware that he was walking into territory that could complicate both their lives. Just concerned. You seem like someone who might not recognize danger until it's too late. Maya studied his face, noting the way his expression had shifted, becoming more serious, more protective. There have been incidents. Men who think a woman alone is an easy target. But I'm careful, and I know how to handle myself better than I look. What kind of incidents? The question came out sharper than Vincent intended, carrying an edge that made Maya blink in surprise. She was getting a glimpse of the man his associates knew, the one whose reputation preceded him through every room he entered. Nothing I couldn't handle, she said carefully. Why does it matter to you? Vincent caught himself, realizing his reaction had revealed more than he'd intended. In his world, threats to civilians were business concerns, territorial disputes that required measured responses. But his instinct to protect Maya felt personal, in a way that had nothing to do with business. It matters, he said simply. The weight behind those words settled between them. Maya felt something shift in the air, a sense that this conversation had moved beyond polite dinner talk into something deeper, more dangerous. At the back table, Vincent's associates were exchanging looks. They'd been waiting for over an hour, their own business suspended, while their boss shared cannoli with a stranger. Marco, Vincent's oldest friend and closest advisor, finally stood and approached their table. Vincent, he said quietly, we should probably wrap things up. Tony's expecting us by 10. Vincent glanced at his watch, surprised to see how much time had passed. The evening had slipped away while he'd been talking with Maya, something that never happened during business meetings. Give me 5 more minutes, Vincent said without looking at Marco. Boss? Tony doesn't like to be kept waiting. The tension in Marco's voice was subtle but unmistakable. Maya sensed undercurrents she didn't understand, the kind of careful dynamics that suggested consequences for delays. I should go, Maya said, starting to gather her purse. You obviously have important things to do. Wait. Vincent's hand moved across the table, not quite touching hers, but close enough that she could feel the warmth. This was important too. The sincerity in his voice stopped her. Maya looked into his eyes, seeing something vulnerable beneath the controlled exterior. "Will I see you again?" The question escaped before she could stop it, surprising them both. Vincent considered the implications of answering yes. Maya represented everything his world typically destroyed. Innocence, hope, genuine goodness. Getting involved with her would be selfish, potentially dangerous for both of them. The smart play was to pay for dinner, walk away, and pretend this evening had never happened. "Do you want to?" he asked instead. "I think so, even though I probably shouldn't." Her honesty was disarming. Vincent found himself smiling despite the complications he could see stretching ahead of them. "Thursday evening. There's a small cafe on Meridian Street near the bookstore. 7 o'clock. I'll be there." Vincent stood, reaching into his jacket for his wallet. He placed several $100 bills on the table, far more than necessary for their meal. "Keep the change," he told the server, who nodded gratefully. As they walked toward the exit together, Maya felt the weight of curious stares from other diners. Whatever had just happened, it was clearly unusual enough to draw attention. At the door, Vincent paused. "Maya? Yes? Be careful in that neighborhood. More careful than you think you need to be." The warning carried an undertone that made her skin prickle. "Is there something specific I should know?" Vincent looked at her for a long moment, weighing how much truth to reveal. "Just trust your instincts. And if anything feels wrong, anything at all, call me." He handed her a business card with only a name and phone number, no company or title. Maya tucked it into her purse, her fingers lingering over the embossed lettering. "Thank you," she said. "For dinner, for the conversation, for seeing me when I felt invisible." Vincent nodded, then did something that surprised them both. He leaned down and kissed her cheek gently, a gesture so tender it seemed to belong to a different man entirely. "Thursday," he said. "Thursday," she agreed. Maya walked toward the bus stop, her mind spinning with questions and possibilities. Behind her, Vincent watched until she was safely inside the bus before returning to his associates. "Interesting evening," Marco observed as they walked to their car. "Yes, it was. Want to tell me what that was about?" Vincent considered the question as they drove through the city toward their next appointment. What could he say? That a $5 blind date had somehow shifted the foundation of his carefully ordered world? That a community center worker had made him question choices he'd been making for decades? "Just being a good citizen," he said finally. Marco laughed, but there was concern in his voice. "Vincent, in 30 years of friendship, I've never seen you be a good citizen to anyone who couldn't do you a favor in return." Vincent stared out the window at the passing streetlights, already counting the hours until Thursday evening. Marco wasn't wrong, and Vincent knew it. But as their black sedan wound through the familiar streets toward Tony Salvatore's warehouse, Vincent found his thoughts drifting back to Table 7. The way Maya had straightened her shoulders when she thought she was being abandoned. The genuine surprise in her eyes when he'd approached her table. The complete absence of calculation in everything she said and did. In his world, everyone wanted something. Information, protection, money, power, revenge. Even his closest allies measured their words, angled their conversations, positioned themselves for advantage. But Maya Rodriguez had asked him if he liked his job. Not what territories he controlled, not what connections he could provide, not what favors he might grant. She'd asked if he was happy. "Tony's going to want to know why we're 40 minutes late," Marco said, adjusting his rearview mirror to check for tails. Old habits died hard in their line of work. "Tony can wait." Vincent's voice carried the quiet authority that had kept peace between 5 families for the better part of a decade. Some things are more important than schedules. Since when? It was a fair question. Vincent Marcelli had built his reputation on punctuality, precision, and the kind of reliability that made him invaluable to men who trusted no one completely. He arrived early to meetings, kept his word regardless of personal cost, and never allowed personal matters to interfere with business obligations. Until tonight. The warehouse district looked exactly as it had for 20 years. Cracked concrete, rusted chain-link fences, the occasional security light casting harsh shadows between buildings. This was where deals were made, disputes were settled, and men learned the consequences of broken promises. Vincent had walked these streets as a young man, eager to prove himself. Now he moved through them like a king surveying his domain. Tony Salvatore's operation occupied 3 connected warehouses near the port. Officially, they stored imported olive oil, specialty cheeses, and other Italian delicacies for high-end restaurants throughout the city. Unofficially, they served as headquarters for the most profitable smuggling operation on the East Coast. Vincent's phone buzzed as Marco parked between 2 other black sedans. A text message from an unknown number. "Thank you again for tonight. I'm still not sure why you helped me, but I'm grateful. Maya." He stared at the screen longer than necessary. Maya had his business card, but she'd used her own phone to reach out. No games, no waiting the prescribed amount of time, no strategic delay to maintain mystery. Just simple gratitude from someone who meant exactly what she said. "You coming?" Marco held the warehouse door open, concern creeping into his voice. Vincent pocketed his phone and followed his oldest friend into the lion's den. Tony Salvatore sat behind a metal desk that had seen better decades, surrounded by shipping containers and the kind of men who solved problems with their hands. At 62, Tony remained broad-shouldered and dangerous, his gray hair slicked back in a style that hadn't changed since the 1980s. He looked up when Vincent entered, his expression somewhere between annoyance and curiosity. "Vincent Marcelli, the man who keeps banker's hours now." "Tony." Vincent took the offered seat across from the desk, noting the subtle positioning of Tony's men around the warehouse. Not threatening, exactly, but prepared. "Good to see you." "Is it? Because I've been sitting here for an hour wondering if maybe you found something more important than our friendship." The words carried weight. In their world, disrespect was measured in minutes, and an hour's delay could be interpreted as a message. Vincent had navigated these waters too long to miss the undercurrent. "Family business," Vincent said simply. "You understand." Tony's expression shifted, the hard edges softening slightly. Family was sacred, even in their line of work. Especially in their line of work. "Everything all right with Sophia? The kids?" Vincent's sister lived in California with her husband and 3 children, far removed from the complications of her brother's life. She called every Sunday, sent photos of soccer games and school plays, pretended not to know exactly how Vincent could afford to pay for her children's private education. "Everyone's fine, just unexpected situation that needed attention." Tony nodded, accepting the explanation without requiring details. "Good. Family first? Always. Now let's talk about our mutual problem." And there you have it. Sometimes the most unexpected encounters happen when we least expect them. Maya walked into that restaurant with $5 and a broken heart, but she walked out with something far more valuable. A reminder that dignity, kindness, and genuine connection can emerge from the most unlikely circumstances. Vincent may have been known for his ruthless reputation, but that night he chose compassion over indifference. This story proves that everyone deserves to be seen, to be valued, and to be treated with respect, regardless of their circumstances. Maya's quiet strength in the face of humiliation and Vincent's unexpected act of kindness remind us that our choices define us more than our reputations ever could. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible tales of human connection. Drop a comment and tell me which part moved you most. And remember, you never know when your own moment of unexpected kindness might change someone's entire world.